Get ready for the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Magic Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down everything in District 4, week in, week out in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney, and now we are joined by our District 4 expert, the man who just wants to be loved, Scott Burton. Hello.
How are we doing, Brandon?
Good. Doing real good. I see you are wearing, so again, audio version of this podcast at IdahoSports.com and wherever you download your podcasts. Video version, if you want to see what Scott and I are up to or what we look like. Scott, you're front running. Is that a Georgia Bulldogs?
Yes, it
t-shirt?
Is. Yeah, Georgia football. Every Wednesday here, it's college day. So we get to wear, anything that represents college. And I've got an array of college football shirts Georgia's one of my favorites. Hate to be an SEC guy, but I do enjoy Georgia. Always have been a big fan. I've got Tennessee. I wore them last week. Of course, huge Coach K fan, so I've got my Duke shirts all lined up. Used to be still am kind of a University of Texas Longhorn fan since Major Applewhite days back in the day. So I'm a college shirt guy. So I have an array of those. So when they announced that this year, that Wednesdays are going to be college days, holy crap. I looked at a whole drawer full of stuff that said, you have not been worn in a long time, every Wednesday.
Was that your idea to do the college Wednesday?
I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. But I was certainly on board. I was an advocate. And it passed, and our superintendent said, yeah, that's a great idea. Because, to promote, kids going to college and just to see different stuff is pretty cool.
Definitely. And that's what we're all about here at IdahoSports.com and the Magic Valley Prepcast each week is shining the spotlight on these high school student athletes that some go on to a great college career, some just become regular students, and I think it's great to continue to shine that spotlight. So let's dive right into it. Let's
do it.
We had a full week of action last week, and we'll start in football, where the biggest story, like it is so many weeks, it seems like, is the Camas County Mushers. We had their athletic director, Mike McCann, on for an off-season interview, and he said, year of the Musher in singular form, why not multiple years of the Musher? And he said, don't be surprised if it's the year of the Musher again in 2022-23. And they start off with a dominant victory over a Rockland team that was ranked in the top 5 in the coaches and the media polls.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this particular game was, Rockland kind of brought back a sour taste in the mouth of the Musher since last season, right? Because in the first 2 minutes of last year, Dawson Kramer, coach's son, tore his MCL. Right out of the gate. And they just really never recovered from that. And then, according to Coach Kramer, Rockland just ran him off the field. And so, and that did not represent Musher football that we saw later on in the season when they kind of got it together, right? Well, so here we go again, right? They came out confident, but they bobbled the opening kickoff, kind of buried themselves in their own territory, went 3 and out, and had a punt blocked on the first possession, and at the 10-yard line, and it was 6-0 before the Mushers could even blink. And it's like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But Camas, they got it together and went into the locker room up 22-6 at the half, and then even had a couple of touchdowns called back in that first half, and or it could have been a lot worse, and they ended up cruising to that 54-26 win. So a great opening victory for the year of the Musher part 2.
Yeah, I'm continually amazed by what they're able to do. I guess I shouldn't be at this point. And they really piled up the statistics. Tristan Smith is kind of the new general leading this team. He threw for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 57 yards on the ground, but really it was the Mushers defense, right? They forced a lot of Rockland turnovers. They picked off 3 passes.
They did. The pressure that they were able to put on Rockland was the key. Troy Smith, Tyson Tupper, they combined for 15 tackles and 2 interceptions at linebacker. So they were controlling the middle of the field. Cody Smith and Trevor Tews, they were on the corners. They were shutting down the receivers, and they ended up combining for 9 tackles and 2 interceptions, forced 6 turnovers. So, it was just one of those efforts by Camas that was dominant on both sides of the football, So good for them, gave them a lot of confidence. The only negative thing about that win for Camas was their all-conference running back, Marcus Staley, broke his leg in the game. And so they're going to be without his services. And he had a kickoff return for a touchdown. And his speed and his big play ability is going to be missed. So, just like they started last year with a big injury, they're starting this year with one as well. But if anything, Camas has learned to overcome those things. And it's going to be another good year for Camas football, I think.
Yeah. Oh, that's devastating news to hear about Marcus Staley. He was such a great player and a good kid too. So we certainly hope his recovery goes well. One other wrinkle to this Rockland Camas County rivalry that's developing. These two teams met for the state basketball championship in the winter as well. And so a lot of these guys played on both sides in that championship game. It was a game where Rockland won it in the final 20 seconds on a pair of free throws, and it could have really gone either way. So I know there was some resentment over how that basketball finish ended up as well. So that also had to feel nice for the Mushers.
Yeah, it's funny how those things transcend into the next season. There's a lot of people that were lost to graduation on both sides from basketball to football, but there are enough commonalities and enough players there to remember. And these small schools like this, if you're playing football, there's a pretty dang good chance you're playing basketball too, And so these are the same kids that are running into each other. And as much as they build that rivalry, there's also a camaraderie there too, because they just are competing against each other all the time. And I think in this situation, and I hope anyway, that they appreciate, that competitive spirit that kind of travels, through these small towns as they go against each other year in and year out.
Yeah, and now Camas County will hit the road this Friday. They're returning to the scene of the crime where they knocked off North Gem, an undefeated North Gem team in the opening round of the playoffs last year, one of the bigger upsets I can remember in some time in Idaho. And now they're headed back for another regular season showdown. This should be a great rematch.
Oh, it should be, and you got to think if you're Camas, you're walking in with a little bit of confidence too, because that this is a place that you can win. And, in 2016, they traveled to North Gem and nobody gave them a chance to win that ball game, and they pulled the upset. And then last year, I don't think anybody gave them a chance to score a point, and they won the game. So, they've got a little bit of swagger going in there, some confidence. And so this should be a really good game. The thing that's going to maybe tilt the scales one way or the other is going to be how Camas, responds to the loss of Marcus Staley. Are they going to be able to fill that void? That's going to be kind of the turning point, I think, in the game and, for their season moving forward.
Definitely. And then they're going up against a team in contrasting styles where Rockland likes to spread it out and throw the ball deep down the field. North Gem is the exact opposite. They played the Malad JV last week in one of those 11-man, 8-man combo deals, and they won 22-0. North Gem did. They threw the ball, Scott, 0 times in the win.
How about that? So, the scouting report's quite simple. It's just going to be toughen up at the line of scrimmage and tackle the dude in front of you.
Yeah, so you go from one extreme, a pass-heavy team, to a team that literally threw 0 passes in week 1. So good luck to the Mushers as they go out to play North Gem this weekend. Overall, Scott, it was a really nice weekend for Camas County's conference. If you look at the other members of their league, Castleford went and shut out Chalice Mackey. This is a co-op that was formed, right before the season started. They won that game 48-0. Jamie Ramos, the new quarterback for Castleford, did really well, threw a couple touchdown passes. And then Dietrich, oh my goodness, Dietrich went over to Rimrock and opened up a can 70-14. This league, once again, even though Kerry left, this league looks awfully tough.
Yeah, it certainly does. And this is one of the funnest leagues here in Southern Idaho, just watching these small schools just year in and year out battle for a state title, because you look at that small division of football, the state champion or the state title game, I mean, this conference right here has got a lot to say about who wins a state title. And they are strong again this year.
Yeah, and big shout out even to Hagerman. Hagerman is playing a full varsity schedule for the first time in a couple of years.
Yeah.
They played last Thursday against Greenleaf Friends, and they won 60-6.
Hey, absolutely. And, and that's not somebody you talk about anymore as Hagerman. You don't talk about him in basketball. You don't talk about him in football. You don't talk about him in chess. I mean, it's just one of those things that Hagerman has just kind of been off to the side. And so that win right there kind of, gets a little shot in the arm to the town of Hagerman. That was good to see.
Hagerman's got a strong history. I know it wasn't that long ago that they were, pretty good. So yeah, it'll be nice to see the Pirates as they continue to move forward. Let's keep in the 8-man ranks and let's talk about what happened at the 1A D1 level. Oakley, the 2-time defending 1A D1 state champs, open up at the Idaho 8-man classic last week, and they absolutely shellacked Prairie 56-0. Lather, rinse, repeat. Porter Pickett played on the offensive line for Oakley last year, and he was a really good defensive end. In fact, he made our IdahoSports.com top 10 list for the 10 best defensive linemen in the state. Well, he's now moved to quarterback, so it's like every lineman's dream, right? Moving from offensive guard to quarterback, and all he did was score 4 touchdowns in that win. So Oakley picking up right where they left off.
Yeah, you don't see that transition very often, but an interesting little point about this is that's the first time that Prairie's been mercy ruled since 2005, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we talked about this last week about how Prairie's offense has just been a constant juggernaut year in and year out, scoring over 70 points 21 times and over 50 points like 5 billion times or whatever it was. But for Oakley to come out and flex their muscle like they did, it got you thinking, is Oakley back? Are they going to do this again? Or is Prairie taking a step back a little bit? Because I know they've got new stuff going on at Prairie, so we'll find out because they're headed to Kendrick. And that's going to be a nice little litmus test.
Yeah, that'll be a matchup Friday on IdahoSports.com. Oakley and Kendrick, the D1 and D2 state champions meeting in a neutral site game. They're going to play in Cambridge, home of the Tri-Valley Titans. And it sounds like I just heard before we hopped on, Scott, it sounds like that game, the kickoff is being pushed up to 4:00. It was originally scheduled for 6. It's going to be at 4:00 now because of, I think, shortage of officials, it sounds like. So they're going to do that game in Cambridge and then probably go somewhere else to double up on Friday night. So
no kidding. Well, and since you brought it up, that's something that maybe we, can talk about in another broadcast is officiating and the lack of, and how we can promote, use this platform to kind of maybe draw some people into wanting to officiate a little bit more because, those things are going to happen. Game changes, game moving off of another date, whatever. We can get into that another time, but that might be something to talk about down the road.
Yes, I agree. That would be another topic that we could explore and get a lot of feedback on. I think that would be really good because it's a big problem. And everybody, it's another one of those elephants in the room that nobody really wants to address too much. There's, some surface level stuff we can do, but there's a big root of the problem that I think needs to be addressed. And anyways, yeah, you're right. We can talk about that at a different time. Kendrick and Oakley, though, Friday night on IdahoSports.com. Back-to-back weeks that Hornet fans can tune in and watch Oakley put on a good show. Other 1A D1 games of note, Murtaugh shut out Wilder 66-0. So here come the Red Devils all of a sudden. Kerry in their very first game at the D1 level went to Grace and lost 7-0, Scott. Kerry turned the ball over a bunch, which doesn't normally happen to them. So I'm sure that's going to be a renewed effort for Kerry. And for Grace, it's unusual to see an 8-man team score 7 points because that means they kicked an extra point, which doesn't happen in the 8-man game a lot. So 7-0, kind of an unusual score.
Yeah, it truly is for a number of different reasons. And both of them you said, it's 8-man football for starters. You generally take the over on the gambling line because there is never a shortage of points in action usually. But yeah, you're right. They don't kick a lot of points. But for Kerry, that could be exactly what they needed, just to ground them a little bit. Not that they weren't grounded, but they're moving up, right? And so maybe this is going to grab their attention. So, okay, hey, this is something new. This is something we have to work at. If we want to get to that next level, we've dominated at this level for so long. if we're going to step up, yeah, we need to step up our game because maybe it is a little bit different than what we're used to. And, Kerry with their tradition, they'll figure it out and they'll be just fine.
Yeah. And for Kerry, it doesn't get any easier this week. They're going to host Butte County, and Butte County played Valley this past week and won 62-12. Butte County was up 62-0 at halftime. They have a running back, Trayton Allen, who touched the ball 4 times. 3 of the 4 times he carried the ball, he was in the end zone, and he ended up rushing for like 104 yards on 4 carries with 3 touchdowns. I
say that's a pretty good average right there, which begs the question, why don't you give it to him 8 times?
Right. So yeah, Kerry, no rest for the weary. They're going to host Butte County. That game can also be viewed on IdahoSports.com Friday night. So if you love 8-man football in the Magic Valley, we got you set with a couple of really appetizing games.
Oh, love 8-man football. It's one of my favorite to call because there is something happening every single play. So yeah, I love 8-man football.
The action is nonstop for sure. Also want to give a quick shout out to the Hanson Huskies. They went to Water Springs and lost 42-40. They can kind of get overshadowed sometimes because of, Camas County and Dietrich and Castle Ford, but they're going to be a good team as well. And Water Springs fans, I live in East Idaho where Water Springs is, and all their fans came away saying, yeah, Hanson's pretty good. So, keep an eye out for the Huskies this year as well.
Again, that conference, you can't turn your back on anybody in that conference.
That's right. Hanson will play Murtaugh this week in the annual battle for the wagon wheel.
Yes.
It's a good rivalry matchup. So good luck to both of the teams there. Let's move to the 11-man game. Second week in a row, we can talk about the Minico Spartans. Second week in a row, they were on the air at IdahoSports.com. Minico this time was at the Rocky Mountain Rumble. It's an annual series between essentially now Idaho schools versus Utah schools. It's really hard to get a win over the Utah schools because, their first day of competition was August 12th. So when they were playing their first varsity game of the year in Utah, Idaho was 2 days into 2-a-days.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have such a head jump. Minico was one of only 2 Idaho teams to actually win at the Rocky Mountain Rumble, and they beat Beaver, Utah 24-14. So Minico a 2-0 start and looking good.
Yeah, and that kind of win right there goes beyond the score because of everything you just said. I mean, you're playing your second game of the year against a team that's got multiple games underneath their belt. And we all know the competition that's down in Utah. And that's why those teams are scheduled, so you can kind of get that test early on what really good football is. And for Minico, it just kind of solidifies that these guys are off to the right start. Minico is going to be a really good football team this year. And I remember calling the Rumble games back in the day. You have to ask Paul about this, but man, we had teams out of Canada, teams out of Vegas, and we had so much smack talking going on with the fans in Canada that it was a constant email stream back and forth, and they were giving us a hard time. We would read their email and then we would respond and then they'd send it. It was so much fun. The Rumble, and some of the fondest memories I ever had broadcasting, 10 years ago or whatever it was, have been at the Rumble. So I'm really glad to see that tradition continuing.
Yeah, there were schools from Washington, California. It really was all over the West. And, I heard from a couple of fans that the last couple of years it's turned into an Idaho versus Utah thing. And they really, the fans have kind of gotten turned off to it because it's so tilted in favor of the Utah schools now, where they start so much earlier than Idaho. It's really hard for Idaho to be competitive. And so I think there's clamoring amongst the fans to maybe try and incorporate more states like it used to be back in the day. So
yeah, and that's a tough thing to do because what you're trying to do is you're trying to put good football together, right? So every game is competitive, and what you're doing is you're making competitions across state lines and at one point across country lines, and trying to find equity in there and see if these two teams would match up with one another. Because the last thing you want is somebody to show up and it's 70-0, and that's no fun for anybody. So that's a tough little thing to put together, and then of course you got costs of everything post-COVID has gone through the roof. And then, nobody's got money in the schools anymore. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into this. And there was a time there that I thought that it was on the verge of maybe going away. And I'm glad to see that it's not. And then maybe as time goes on, we can get exactly what you're saying, and not tilt it so much, get some of those people that you never heard of coming in. And it could, be extra fun.
Definitely. Minico, second game in a row. JT Garza was named the IdahoSports.com player of the game. He is such a lethal threat out of the backfield in the receiving game. And Carson Wayman is really dialed in. I really do think Minico is more diverse offensively this year, to the point where Japheth Bendelay doesn't have to carry the ball 25 times. He can carry it 15 times, and Joseph Terry can carry it 10 times, and Garza can get 15 touches between rushes and receptions. And it's a dynamic offense for Minico now. I think they're in a much better spot than they were a year ago. So it'll be fascinating to see them as they continue their trajectory. They play another Utah team this week. Or maybe it's next week. No, they do. They go to Ridgeline High in Utah this Friday night. So they know that, hey, they're going to get another tough game. And this is what we talked about, right? They want to challenge themselves with the schedule a little more this year.
Yeah, they knew that they were going to have a good team coming back. They knew that they were going to have just about everybody return from a team that got upset in the playoffs. We talked about that previously, but the thing about what Minico's doing right now is they've got 3 weapons in the backfield, 4 if you count their quarterback. And they haven't been notoriously known for passing the football. But what they're doing is they're utilizing those running backs in the passing game. And if you do that correctly, that is so hard to cover. And Minico's finding a way to get it done through a balanced attack. And so this will be really interesting, almost a new look in a way, if you're just so used to the ground and pound for Minico. They with this schedule, and if they can muscle through this and they can stay healthy, and with the chip on the shoulder they have coming out of last year, who knows how far they'll go.
Yep. Twin Falls is always lurking. They beat Valley View 41-32 in a non-conference game. They got down 24-14 early, and then kind of stemmed the tide and surged back. Austin Crum was 10 of 15 passing for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a pretty efficient day. And Wyatt Solosabal, 93 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing on just 10 carries. So he averaged almost 10 yards a pop as well. So this is a Twin Falls offense that could be big play. We did, of course, have one conference game. We talked about this week 1 conference battle between Mountain Home and Burley. Last year, Mountain Home squeaked out a narrow win. Burley wanted to make sure that didn't happen again this year. Burley put up a 62-39 win. That new Bobcat offense looks legit.
Oh, yeah. There is no question about it. This Bobcat offense, with their speed, is going to put up a lot of points. And so you are going to see a lot of high-scoring games when it comes to Burley. It's just brand new. And Gatlin Bear didn't even play that game, And so imagine putting his speed out onto the field. That Burley offense is going to be something to reckon with. And for the fans in Burley, they're going to have something to get excited about. And mark the calendar, if things kind of develop the way that they're going, that Burley Minico game, who over the years has been really lopsided, might be an actual heavyweight fight. We'll see. We'll see how Burley matures and see how Minico develops. So that interesting down the road.
For sure. They the rivalry on the river, I think they call it now. They play for an oar, a rivalry oar. I believe it's been early 2000s since the last time Burley beat Minico. It's been a really, really long time. So we'll see if they can keep it up.
Yep.
Burley this week will host Valley View. So a Valley View team that lost to Twin Falls in a shootout, a Burley team that won in pretty high fashion. Burley will host Valley View. That game can be viewed on IdahoSports.com. So all the Bobcat fans and maybe some Valley View fans can tune in and catch the Bobcats in a non-conference battle. Gooding went to Jerome last week and lost 26-7. We know Jerome's kind of rebuilding a little bit, a lot of younger players having some impact for Jerome. And now the Tigers turn around and play a Kimberly team that looked pretty awesome. That game will be on IdahoSports.com as Jerome is at Kimberly this week. Kimberly beat Snake River 34-14. And you might think, 20 points, yeah, whatever. But consider this: Snake River was a top 5 team in both the coaches and media polls. And then look at the offensive production from the Bulldogs, Scott. This was crazy.
Yeah, 560 yards of total offense, but in a balanced attack, over 300 passing, over 200 rushing. I mean, Kimberly still has some weapons, and they still got some dudes who can play. And that's a huge win right out of the gate against a ranked Snake River team. But to do it in the fashion that they did, they could run it, they could pass it, they did it on defense as well. So, good for Kimberly.
Yeah, new head coach in Joe Dill, and some new players in there as well. I think they're motivated to show that, hey, last year was kind of a fluke. They had a lot of injuries last year and didn't make the playoffs after they were favored to win the league. And I wouldn't want to play Kimberly this year. I think they're a very motivated team for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and this is the staple of Kimberly: to get out, play fast, put points on the board, but more importantly, push that ball up and down the field. That's what they've done all those years. And it was nice to see him continue that this year. So, in the past, in that conference right there, I mean, it's Filer, Buell, Kimberly, Gooding, right? And, I got to see Gooding last week. They're not as explosive as they have because, they lost playmakers. They're basically just trying to refill the cupboard. But they had a couple of standout players, Gooding did. And what they did is they were able to wear you down a little and show a little bit of toughness. Gooding is always one of those teams that just has dudes up front, some big guys that they'll wear on you after a while. And I saw them kind of do that a little against Jerome last week. So, Gooding and their physicality is what's going to keep them around, and Kimberly and their speed and their big playmaking ability. Well, guess what? It's the same thing it's always been, isn't it? The toughness of Gooding, the speed and quickness of Kimberly. So, that could shape up to be a good conference. And then, you've got Buell, who's revigorated under Alan Reynolds in his second year. So that conference is getting better every year.
Yeah, Buell went to Weezer in another game that was on IdahoSports.com and lost 24-0. But considering they were playing the defending 3A champs and considering how lopsided the playoff game was between those two teams last year, they've closed the gap with Weezer. So, keep an eye out for Buell for sure. Buell will host Mountain Home this weekend. We're going to find out where Gooding sits real quick, Scott, because they go play Homedale this week. Good luck.
I'm kidding. Get those out of the way early, but that's going to be a tough one. Real tough.
Definitely. And then quick shout out to the 2A schools in the Magic Valley. Both won last week. Declo season opener beat Nampa Christian. They were the District 3 champs last year. They won pretty easily, 39-7. And we talked about Wendell last week, Scott, and what Coach John Helmendaler is doing with the Trojans. They go and shut out West Jefferson, which was a playoff team a year ago, and they shut them out 21-0.
Yeah, don't turn your back on Wendell. We talked about how Coach Helmendaler is just dialed in and the things that he's doing over there, and the kids are responding, and there's next thing you know, there's a culture of football going on over there, so that's exciting to see. And man, what another nice win, or a good win for them. Even though they lost the first week, they hung around. Now they got it together and they got the win. So, 2 good weekends of football in a row for Wendell to open the season.
Yeah, and Wendell travels to Marsing this week. Marsing is 1-0. They're led by former Marsing great, former Boise State and Chicago Bears linebacker Shea McClellan. He got a win in his debut as a head coach for Marsing. So that's kind of an interesting storyline game as well. Good luck to the Trojans as they go play Marsing. Raft River will open this week at Camii in an 8-man game that should be pretty good. And Lighthouse Christian will also make their season debut this week. They will host that Grace team that just beat Kerry 7-0. So a couple of teams making late debuts, but overall the action this week promises to be pretty entertaining. And we got a lot of Magic Valley games on IdahoSports.com. You can click the game streams tab on the homepage to see specifically which games we will be broadcasting. Let's shift to from football to football, the authentic football, right? It's we're going to talk a little soccer, Scott. No surprises that Sun Valley Community School, the Cutthroats, have gotten off to a great start. Anytime they make noise in non-conference is when I really perk up and pay attention, because it's hard to gauge because the conference they play in is so big. They don't get a lot of non-conference opportunities. So anytime Sun Valley does something out of league, I kind of take notice.
Yeah, no question, because you look at the Cutthroats, and their record speaks for themselves, for itself, but they still sometimes don't really get an accurate depiction of how good they are because of what you just said. And then when they step out and they go places like Weezer, that we're going to talk about here in a minute, it kind of solidifies this Cutthroat program in soccer is legit.
Yeah, so the past couple of years, especially on the boys' side, Weezer and Sun Valley have gotten to know each other. There's kind of a mutual respect between the two programs. It's really stemmed on the boys' side, but they've made it a boys-girls kind of regular series with the Wolverines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this past weekend, they went up, the boys went to play at Weezer, and that's the first time they played really at Weezer, I believe, since like the late 90s. But it doesn't mean they haven't played Weezer before, because they certainly did, most recently in the 2020 state title game in Post Falls, where they won 2-0, and they beat them in 2019 as well, 6-0. So they are very familiar with each other, but the community school definitely is holding the advantage. And boy, what a test that they've got. And this past game that the Cutthroats played, they only had 12 varsity players suited up. They were missing some starters due to injuries and not having enough practices and whatever the reason was. But they were still able to, shorthanded team get the win. And man, that was really, really good to see for the Cutthroats get that huge win against Weezer.
And the girls also played Weezer and made it a clean sweep, the Lady Cutthroats.
They did. They won 3-0 behind 3 goals from Mia Hansmeyer. And obviously the player of the game. That was great for them. Ladies won 3-0. The guys won 2-1, I believe was their score. And now the Cutthroats are 1-0. The boys, they're not 1-0. They are 3-0, right? 4-0. Sorry, they're 4-0. But they're getting some good standout play, and they're playing some really good defense. I mean, you're playing against these teams. You're holding 1 goal to Weezer. You beat Filer 9-0 probably on the 29th. It's just one of those teams that is just really good on both sides of the ball. I'm not sure what the terminology, the pitch.
Yeah, the pitch.
The pitch. Yeah. Okay. So I'll get my soccer lingo down. I watched Ted Lasso.
Yeah, that's right in your wheelhouse, no doubt about it.
Isn't it? Yeah, totally in my wheelhouse.
And again, as a reminder for Sun Valley last year at state, it was like a reversal of roles where the boys team was pretty dominant in the regular season, came in as the number 1 seed according to the Max Preps rankings, had to play the 8 seed Kimberly, a conference rival, and they lost 1-0 right away. And just like that, Sun Valley's chances at state on the boys' side were extinguished. They ended up getting to the consolation where they lose to American Falls in penalty kicks. And then it was the opposite for the girls. The girls were good, but didn't win the league in the regular season. Kimberly was the regular season champ. And they got Kimberly got the 3 seed at state. Sun Valley was the 6 seed, and the Sun Valley girls knock out Kimberly in overtime 2-1. And they use that and get all the way to the championship. So the 6th seeded Lady Cutthroats got all the way to the title match last year, where they lost to a really dominant Fruitland team only by 1, 4-3. So it's just it was always interesting to me how the teams kind of reverse roles when it got to state last year.
Yeah, for sure. And then for the boys this year, I mean, they are going to be solid. They've got 11 seniors that are returning, only losing 2 players to graduation from last year. So this is a good team last year. This is going to be a really good team this year that's going to be in the mix at the very end. Yeah,
and if you think they're motivated and hungry, no doubt about it, they want Kimberly. They want a piece of Kimberly right after last year at state. They will play Kimberly Thursday, September 8th. So maybe we can talk about that match in a couple weeks here on the Magic Valley Prepcast. All right, before we duck out of here, Scott, one of the big volleyball tournaments of the year is coming up this weekend in Pocatello, the annual Peg Peterson Invite in Highland. There's a lot of Magic Valley schools that are going to be coming over and competing. kind of an interesting thing this year, Scott, where the results of the regular season tournaments aren't going to count towards the official standings or the Max Preps rankings. There was a lot of confusion last year over which matches do we count, which ones don't we? And I guess the IHSA just said none of them count, and that's going to be the easiest way to deal with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it does get a little tricky because you go to these tournaments to try new things, maybe experiment with different lineups, different different attacks that you want to implement throughout the course of the season. And so I agree with this. I mean, you just play tournaments, you play them differently than you would like regular season matches. So, I mean, I agree that they shouldn't count. And you go and you're going to experiment with different lineups, and you're going to try different things in a game setting. And you don't want to be held accountable on your Max Preps ranking for it. But, these are the tournaments that you go get better at. And that's what it's designed to do. And you're going to see different competition, than you normally see in the regular season. And this is one of the biggest volleyball tournaments in the state, if not the biggest. And so, yeah, we've got a few Magic Valley schools descending in Pocatello to do this. And it should be some good volleyball. So if you're in the area, man, you've got 2 solid days of volleyball. Go check it out.
And it got so big now that they have it at multiple venues. Highland High School has some action, but then they use the Mountain View Event Center as well, which is a big, huge facility. They can play up to like 4 matches at a time in there as well. So the only problem I anticipate with the Max Preps in the tournaments is like if you play an out-of-state team. Like there was a lot of Idaho schools that went down and played in Utah. Well, nobody told the Utah schools those aren't supposed to count. So the Utah schools report them, and then the Idaho schools get dinged. So there's going to have to be some finagling, I think, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's another wrinkle in the Max Preps how do you deal with those kinds of things? And it does kind of end up in whispers in the hallways about scheduling and stuff like that. Well, who's going to be at the tournament? Who do we play? Who do we open with? Those kinds of things, because ultimately you don't want your ranking hurt. And again, we could talk about Max Preps every week. But yeah, there's always going to be something that turns up, and there you go. There's another one.
Definitely. So we'll keep an eye out on Magic Valley volleyball teams. I will say really quick, Filer went over to the New Plymouth Invitational this past weekend and won. Now, none of those will count for anything except the fact that, hey, they went over and beat some pretty good teams. And hey, guess what? Filer, breaking news, Filer's good in volleyball again. So
Shocker. Good for Filer, though. It's good to see them continue to battle and be really good in that program. And they're solid.
Definitely. All right. Well, speaking of solid, another solid show delivered from Scott Burton here on the Magic Valley Prepcast.
Just trying to be loved, Brandon. That's all. Just want to be loved.
Well, we'll come on back next week and see what kind of feedback and response we get, and maybe we'll be less popular this week. I'm all right with that.
I'm okay with it.
For sure. All right. Thanks for tuning into the Magic Valley Prepcast. For Scott Burton, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.